everyone, welcome to the OklaRoots YouTube channel. In today's tutorial, we are going to make an adorable little bag that I have been wanting to make since it came out. I'm so excited about this video today. Today, we're going to make the Rayna sling, and this pattern comes to us from our favorite, Linds Handmade Designs. This bag is the cutest thing I think I've ever seen. Oh my gosh, this bag is so adorable. It is the perfect size for a waist bag. It is the perfect size for a crossbody, like chest bag. You can wear it as a little purse. We all know I am a big fan of fanny packs, which I know some people think that's a funny word, but I'm a big fan of bags like this that can function across your chest, across your waist, over your shoulder. I love it. And this size is perfect, like the most perfect size ever. So let's walk through this adorable bag. You have a front zipper pocket, so you have a bottom panel and a top panel and an adorable little zipper right here. Bada bing, nice and easy. On the back, you just have a back main panel. On the sides, we have these very, very clever wings. I will tell you, I've made a lot of waist bags, fanny packs, whatever you want to call them. I've made a lot of these types of bags, and the wings always seems to be like the hardest part of the design. Sometimes it's meshed into the back panel and the front panel. It's always the most challenging. This is so easy. These little side wings, these incredible little tabs that hold the D-rings, it is so easy. This might be the easiest fanny pack I've ever made, ever. And then on the inside, we have just a plain back panel. If you would like to add a pocket there, go for it. You want to add an ID window, you want to add some card slots, easy, easy addition. And then on the front panel, we have this adorable mesh pocket. This bag is it's pretty easy. It's pretty easy. The hardest thing about this bag are going to be these corners, and that's because Linds is pretty much the master of rounded corners. So you're going to get a really tight, perfectly rounded, sharp corner on all four of these edges, but it's going to require a little bit of finesse to get there. We'll talk about that in the tutorial and all my tips and tricks on how to do it. However, the result is absolute perfection. I mean, absolute perfection. I also want to take a moment to talk about these tabs here. Now, I'm using a black webbing and a black vinyl, so it might be a little difficult for you to see. But look how fancy this strap is. It's so stinking cute. And it is a removable strap. So if you'd like to take the strap off, use it on a crossbody bag, use it on a purse, you easily could. And if you wanted to add a different strap, like let's say you want to have a black strap for when you're going out and about, but maybe it's like New Year's Eve, maybe it's a Christmas party or something, and you want to add like a funky gold sparkly strap, you can easily do that. So if you're loving the look of this bag, all the material, all the products, all of the hardware, everything comes to us from the Bag Making Bee Club. That's right, this is the Bag Making Bee Club's December box. This is a monthly subscription box, and it is a surprise every single month. We do not tell you ahead of time. We do not give you hints. I kind of give you I try to give hints on social media every now and then. Not enough to really know, but enough to kind of give you the vibe of it. But this is a surprise box. But we work really hard to make sure it's a really good surprise. You're going to have a good amount of leftover material today. You're going to have the most adorable little bag. The only thing you're not going to have is my personal bag tag. But other than that, you're going to have the hardware. You're going to have the incredible exclusive bag tag from Hardwood and Hide. Every month, this is going to be a different tag, a different design, and it is exclusive to the Bag Making Bee Club. So it's a really fun way to kind of collect some adorable tags. I will say for the Bag Making Bee Club, which is a more confident beginner intermediate level, this is definitely on the easier side. We wanted to give you guys something quick and easy and fun, a great gift for the holidays, a great, I need a moment to myself, quick make. But if you're looking for a true beginner level subscription box, we have our every other month subscription box, which is the Bag Making Babe box. And in that one, you're gonna get material, patterns, everything that's really geared more towards beginners. However, it still gives you a very professional finish. Like if you saw last week's video, that was the Babe box, and that is one of the fanciest bags I've ever made. No one is gonna think a beginner made that bag. So thank you as always to Linds Handmade for allowing me to feature your patterns on the channel. If you have not checked out her patterns, you must be new to sewing. You need to go check out her website. She has the most amazing patterns. I mean, seriously, like patterns that I'm pretty sure in the bag world have gone viral. They are so incredible. This is one of them. If there are any patterns from Linds Handmade that I haven't featured and you'd like to see on the channel, make sure you leave a comment down below with the name of the pattern and I'll add it to the list. Thank you also to the Bag Making Bee Club for sponsoring today's video. I'll have links down below if you want to go check out either the Babe box or the Bee box. Both are great. If you're new to the OklaRoots YouTube channel, please consider clicking subscribe down below. If at any point you like this video, please give it a like. Any questions, comments, shout outs, anything at all, leave them down in the comment section. All right, guys, let's get started. So for this bag, you're gonna need about 1/4 yard of your exterior material. I'll be using bonded nylon. For the lining, you're gonna need about 3/8 a yard. I will be using a water-resistant canvas. And then you're gonna want like a fat quarter of a cork or vinyl or leather, something that can be left raw edged. And then about a fat quarter of mesh fabric. I mean, this is the finished size of the mesh pocket, so a very, very small amount of mesh fabric. Next up, I have 2 1-inch wide swivel hooks, a 1.5-inch wide strap adjuster, a 1.5-inch wide rectangle ring, 2 1-inch wide D-rings, and then I have 2 zipper pulls. These are both number 5 zipper pulls to go with my zipper. You're gonna need at least 23 inches of number 5 zipper tape. This is not metal zipper tape. This is just a regular plastic zipper teeth that you can easily sew over. I will be using 6 rivets today. I will say that at least 4 of them are required, so you're gonna need rivets for this bag. And then I have 1.5-inch wide webbing. You're gonna need 1.5 to 2 yards of this. And then I will be using a 1-inch wide fold over elastic for my binding and also for the mesh pocket. So I would suggest you have about 3 yards or so of this. Also, I have this adorable sew-on bag tag I'll be using today, as well as my metal bag tag. This bag tag is from the Heartwood and Hide, and it goes perfectly with our material. It's so cute, and it is exclusive to the Bag Making Bee box this month. So here's all the other stuff I'll be using today. I have my rivet press and my hole punch. This is purely for the rivets today. In the top thread, I will be using a Tex 45 weight thread. This is a black thread. And then in the bobbin, I'm using this Gutermann thread. This is just the classic 50 weight thread from what used to be Joann's. You can now buy this elsewhere. I think I got this from Fat Quarter Shop, actually. The needle I'll be using today is a Microtex 8012. I have a turning wand to poke out any corners, a seam ripper, and a couple different marking tools. This is a chalk pencil tool, and it actually has 3 different colors. It's super handy. I'm a big fan of it. And then an air erasing marker. Lots of plastic clips to hold everything together. Some Beacon 3-in-1 glue and duct tape. This is really just for my metal bag tag. If you don't have a metal bag tag or you're not using one today, you'll be fine without that. And then a 1-inch by 6-inch ruler and a lighter. And I always forget to mention these, but double-sided tape, 1/4 inch wide and 1/8 of an inch wide. Easy to sew over. Double-sided tape is very handy. So let's run through these pattern pieces. First, we have the main body. You're gonna have 1 cut of exterior, and this is actually gonna be the back side of the bag. So the side that's against your body, not as noticeable as the front of the side of the bag. And then you're gonna have 3 cuts of lining. I am not using any interfacing or stabilizer today. However, if you did want to apply any of that, make sure you do that before we get started. Now here's our material for the front of the bag. You're gonna need the front top exterior, front top lining, and then you're gonna need the front bottom exterior and front bottom lining. Like I said, this is gonna be the front of the bag, so if you have pattern placement or anything you really want featured on the front side, now's the time to think about that. So next up are our side wings. These are gonna go on the side of the bag. You're gonna have 4 cuts total, but they're gonna be 2 and 2 mirrored. So you see, they will face right sides together just like this. So make sure you don't just use the pattern piece and cut 4 of the same things. You're gonna use the pattern piece and cut 2 of them, then you're gonna flip your pattern piece over and you're gonna cut 2 more. Then you're gonna have 2 strap accents. This is gonna be out of that raw edge material. So this is like a little black leather I'm using today. You're gonna want a strap end also from the raw edge material. And then you're gonna need 4 D-ring connectors. Now, how I like to do this, I like to use the pattern piece and I cut out 2 of them. And then I cut out 2 more rectangles that are a little bit bigger than those original cuts. It's hard to see, isn't it? But they're a little bit bigger than the original little cuts that I made. And this way I can build it without having to match up edges. I'll show you how I do that, but I just cut 2 out using the template and then 2 more that are just kind of scrap pieces. And then finally, you're gonna have 2 cuts of exterior and 2 cuts of lining for your zipper panels. This is gonna be on the top of the bag. And then you're gonna have 1 cut of exterior and 1 cut of lining for the bottom part of your gusset. And then you're gonna have 1 cut of a mesh material. This is for that mesh pocket. So the first thing I wanna do is prep these D-ring connectors. So I have my 2 cuts that I already cut out. And then I have my 2 scraps. What I'm gonna do is on the wrong side, the back side of these pieces I've already cut out, and I'm just going to put a good amount of glue on the back side of this D-ring connector. You could use double-sided tape here if you'd like. However, I find the glue is a lot easier to work with. So I'm just kind of dabbing it all over there. And then I'm gonna take my scrap piece of leather, flip it so it's wrong side up, and I'm just gonna push these wrong sides together. I don't really have to worry about anything lining up because this cutout piece is you know, fully enclosed by the scrap. And now I'm just gonna let that glue dry. I'm gonna repeat that for my other D-ring connector and scrap material. So now I'm gonna let these two dry while I prep the rest of my material, and then we'll come back to this. So deciding the length of your webbing is really personal preference on how you're gonna wear the bag. If you're gonna be making it for yourself or someone else, the first thing you're gonna wanna do is cut a piece of webbing that's 6 inches long. We're all gonna have that. So cut off a piece of your webbing that's 6 inches long, and then the rest of your webbing, it can be anywhere between 50 inches long or shorter. You can play around with this later and cut it down a little bit more if you'd like. I will say if you leave it really long, like the webbing I have here is, it's probably gonna be, for the most part, too big to wear around your waist. It's probably gonna be one that you would wear across your chest, which is really cute. But it's totally up to you. I think I'm gonna have this webbing here be about 45 inches because I left it at 50 inches previously and it was quite large. So I think I'm gonna cut this down to 45 inches this time. And then the other piece is 6 inches. But make sure you have your webbing prepped the way you want it, and you can set it to the side with your 2 pieces. I will not be making my own binding today, but the pattern does show you how to use the lining material to make your own binding. I do kind of worry that with the water resistant canvas on a domestic machine, it could get a little bulky if I tried to do that. So I'm going to stick with the fold over elastic. However, if you want to do the lining, then that will have a very professional finish to it. But one thing I am going to do to prep is I'm going to mark the midpoints on all of these pieces. So on the gussets, the zipper gusset, the bottom gusset, we're going to mark the midpoints along the long edges. On the front panel bottom, front panel top, so we're going to mark the midpoints on the top and the bottom. And then on the main body panel, exterior and linings, we're going to mark the midpoints on the long edges and also on the sides. And then the final part of your prep step is to cut down your zippers. The measurements for this are in the pattern. So after I got done with all that prep, my D-ring connectors are now glue dried. So I'm going to take these to the sewing machine, and I don't know if you can see. I'm trying to get the light to reflect it. So can you see the smaller cutout and how it's on top of the larger piece? They're wrong sides together. I'm gonna take this to the sewing machine and I'm gonna top stitch around the edge of that oval cutout. Okay, so just the finished piece. I'm gonna top stitch around the entire edge of each one of these at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. You can backstitch at the beginning and if you'd like, or you can leave the threads really long and tie them off, but just make sure you're top stitching around the oval pieces, not the scrap. Okay, so once you have these stitched on, I know it's still hard to see from the front here, but you see on the back, you can see my bobbin thread there, and then I just tied off the threads on the back there. And the reason I like this is because now I can just take my scissors and I can just cut right alongside that top piece all the way around. And this allows me to top stitch these 2 small pieces together without having to worry about them moving around, because I've found that even if I like pre-cut them out and glue them together, they still have a tendency to kind of stretch or twist or move at the sewing machine. So by having one piece cut and the other piece bigger and then just cutting it down after I stitch it together, I found it the easiest for me. So I'm gonna do this for both of them. So once you have them all cut and cute, we're going to just overlay our template. And on the template, you have 4 dots, and you're going to poke out those dots using a pen or a stiletto, and then we're just going to use those 4 dots to mark placement for our rivets. So do this for both of your connectors, and once you have those marked, you're going to grab your hole punch and you're just going to punch out the holes for all 4 of those spots. Okay, your connectors are all prepped and ready to go. You can set these to the side. Okay, so now we're going to build a strap. So you're going to need your 2 pieces of webbing, your long piece and your short piece. You're going to need your 2 strap accents, your 1 strap end, your 2 swivel hooks, and your rectangle ring and a strap adjuster. So let's work on the long piece first. You're going to take one end of your long strap, and it's always a good idea to grab a lighter and just melt down the ends of your webbing to prevent fraying. And then we're going to take our strap end piece, which is our little rectangle. If you'd like to add some double-sided tape to the back, you can. I like to just put one piece that goes diagonally across. I try to avoid sewing over double-sided tape as much as possible. It's not the end of the world if you sew over it, but it can be a burden. Take the paper off the tape, and then you might want to just kind of give it a little bend. And you're just going to wrap it around the end of the webbing. Do your best to look from the top and make sure both of the raw edges match up with one another. If you need clips to help as well, go ahead and use those. And now I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and I'm going to top stitch just along the inner raw edge. I'm not going to do the full rectangle, just the inner raw edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. All right, once I have that stitched on, I like to grab a lighter and just melt down the sides. It gets rid of the little fuzz on the backing of my leather, and it also helps burn down the ends of the tails of my thread. So now grab your strap adjuster and the end that has the vinyl over it, and then just take your strap adjuster, place it right side up, thread the end of your webbing up from the bottom and over that middle bar. So now I'm going to use one of my strap end rivet tools to help me mark rivet placement for this. So as you fold this over the end of your strap, you are going to want to line this up, and you're going to want to put 2 rivets over that fold over. Now, if you're not using rivets here, you can just sew over this. So you can just wrap this around the middle bar and then just top stitch a little box right around that vinyl fold over. But if you are using rivets, I'm going to use this tool right here because this seems to work well. And I just want to make sure whenever I mark placement for my rivets that it's not going to cut through my stitching that I already made when I attach that strap in. That looks good. And it's not too close to the bottom either. I'm going to grab my hole punch and just punch out placement here. And then I'm going to grab one rivet and insert that before I punch out the other hole. I just find it's easier that way. And then turn this around and punch out the next. So you're punching the hole out the end that's covered in vinyl and also the other side of your webbing. And then I'm going to grab my rivet press and just press these into place real quick. To me, this is easier than sewing, but if you prefer sewing it down, go ahead and do that. Now take your webbing with that fold over piece we've been working on facing up, and we're going to go to the other side of our webbing. And we're going to just slide this unfinished end of the long webbing through the rectangle ring and then pull it back towards your adjuster and then slide it along the side that has the fold over up from the bottom and over that middle bar and then out the other side. So you should have something like this now. You have a raw edge of your webbing, your adjuster in the center, and then you have your rectangle ring on the end. So now we're going to take the 6-inch piece of webbing and we're going to just thread it through the other side of the rectangle ring and bring the 2 short edges together. If you haven't already done so, you might want to grab a lighter and just melt down these edges because I know mine are fraying. And then just clip these 2 short edges together. And now let's sew these 2 edges together. You can just sew them together about a 1/4 inch seam allowance. All right, so the meat of the strap is done. Now we got to add the fun part. So we're going to work on the strap accents. So take one of your accents and just fold one of the ends, and you're going to thread it through your swivel hook and then pull your strap accents wrong sides together like this. So the swivel part is on the right side, the back of the bar of the swivel is on the wrong side. So now you can use double-sided tape for this or glue. I prefer glue. And so I'm just going to dab some glue along the back wrong side of this strap accent. You're going to do it on both sides. And then you're going to take one of the ends of your webbing and you're going to lay the end of your webbing over that glue and then just fold that strap accent over. Now, do your best to line up all the edges. This is a really great shape, so you should be able to find the smaller corners next to the hardware and then the longer edges and really get this matched up. It is important that this is matched up properly because when we top stitch this, we're only going to see one side and you got to make sure you catch the back. So let's just clip this in there, give it a press, make sure the glue sets. Repeat this with the other edge that has the 2 pieces of the shorter webbing. You're going to repeat that and just glue this over that end as well. So make sure you give the glue a couple minutes to dry. It'll make it a lot easier to sew this on. And once it is dry, you're going to take this to the sewing machine and make sure you have these right side up. So look at your strap adjuster and make sure your strap adjuster is facing up, and that's the right side of your strap. And you're going to top stitch around all the edges here at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, and you're going to top stitch as close as you can to that bar. I would suggest using a zipper foot for this so you can get nice and close. Take your time. You can tie off your threads like we did previously, or you can back stitch at the beginning and the end. Just go slow when doing this, and if you're really worried that your top stitching might be a bit messy, just make sure if you're using black material, use black thread. You're never going to see if it's a little wonky. And there we go, easy peasy, and it looks so fancy, isn't it? I'm sorry, I know it's hard to see everything because we use so much black. It's hard sometimes to like have a bag that looks really good finished, but also looks good in a tutorial. So now I took my template for these strap ends and I just folded the little, I forgot, like what is this called? I don't know what this shape is called, like a gem shape, I don't know. But I found the center of one side of this just to help me mark placement, because I'm only going to use one rivet here because I don't have enough to do 2 rivets. So I'm just going to line this up with the end of my strap end and just make a mark in that center hole that I put on my paper. And I'm going to do this for the other one as well. You don't have to be too particular on adding a rivet at all. I mean, you don't have to add a rivet here. And if you want to add it somewhere else, go ahead and do it. If you had a decorative rivet or a Chicago screw that was like a star or a flower or something, that would look really cool here. But I'm going to grab my hole punch and I'm going to punch a hole right in the center. And then I'll just pop my rivet in that hole. Do this for both of them. And then grab your rivet press and press this down. Like I said, this is completely optional. And if you wanted to do some decorative stitching, if you're a really strong top stitcher, this would be a great option to just do some sort of little stitching design on this. I've seen a number of people actually use their cutting machine, like a Silhouette or a Cricut machine, and they've cut out little shapes on this, which are so cool, like a snowflake, gingerbread man, all kinds of fun stuff. So you can get really creative with this, and it's a nice big piece and lots of room to play with. So you can set this to the side now. So now let's work on this mesh pocket. So you're going to get your mesh pocket cut and a small cut of your elastic. And you're gonna just fold this over. So fold over elastic has a natural fold running right down the center, which makes it really easy to work with. You can use double-sided tape here if you'd like. I don't personally like to use double-sided tape with mesh and elastic. For me, it always gets kind of messed up and pleated and stuff. I don't know why, it just doesn't work for me. So I find just wrapping it around the top and using clips is more than fine. So now I'm gonna take this to the sewing machine and I'm just gonna top stitch right along the bottom edge of that elastic at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitch at the beginning and the end. So once you have it stitched on, if you have binding overhanging the edges, you can trim it down. Make sure you caught the back of your binding. And take one of your main lining panels and lay it right side up. And take your mesh pocket, lay it right side up, line up the bottom and the sides. If it helps to measure and mark on the sides, on the edges, where the top of the pocket should be, go ahead and do that. I'm just gonna eyeball it. And then we're gonna add some clips to the sides and bottom to hold the mesh pocket in place. And now we'll go to the sewing machine and just baste around the sides and the bottom, all at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once you have it basted on, you can just flip this over and look at the wrong side and trim down the corners of your mesh and any overhang you have. If you have some on the side as well, trim that down. Just want to make sure that this is all one size. Now, if you would like to separate this pocket, the pattern does have you kind of go in a little bit on the side and do a little top stitching to make this into 2 pockets. I'm going to leave it as 1 because it is pretty small. However, when I do separate a pocket like this, my method is I'm just going to use a chalk pencil and mark a line where I want it. And then I'm just going to start at the very bottom and top stitch right up over that line all the way to the top of the pocket and then just go right back down the line. I don't separate them. I don't do like 1/8 of an inch between them. I just go right over the line, top to bottom. And I feel like it's pretty sturdy. Okay, you can set this to the side for just a moment. So now let's work on the wings. So remember we said that they're mirrored. You're gonna grab 2 mirrored buddies, just like this. So they should look like they're looking in a mirror. And we're gonna flip them right sides together. And we're gonna clip along all the edges, but mainly focusing on the top and the angular side. So this long straight edge over here that I have on the right, we're gonna leave that unclipped. We don't need to work with that because we're gonna turn it out through that side. So do this with both combos. So now we're gonna go to the sewing machine and we're gonna sew along the top, the angular side, the curvy side, all the way down to the bottom, all at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. You are not gonna be sewing along the long straight edge on either one of these. Back stitch at the beginning and the end. All right, once you have it stitched in place, I'm gonna grab my scissors and I'm going to just cut all the seam allowances that have the stitching down in half. I'm just cutting it right in half. And once I have it cut in half, then I'm gonna go to all the corners and I'm gonna cut those down even more, just at a little 45-degree angle. And then along this curved bit here on the side, I'm just going to cut little tiny, like perpendicular cuts to the seam. I'm not getting too close to the thread, but I'm getting close enough, just where it's curvy. So I'm gonna do that with the other wing as well. And then I'm going to gently turn this right side out. I can open this through that opening on the straight edge. So push it out gently with your fingers and then grab some sort of a turning tool and really get into those corners and gently poke into those corners to get this shaped really nicely. If you're using a quilt cotton here, you can iron it to flatten it out. However, with bonded nylon, I find that rolling out the seam with my fingers works really well. And then using clips to hold it helps flatten it before I take it to the machine. And I'm always paying attention to the raw edge as well, the straight edge. I want to make sure that's still lining up. I don't want that to kind of, you know, become unaligned. Okay, so once you have it flattened out and the seams are rolled out, I just add clips everywhere along the straight edge as well. And what we want to do now is we want to top stitch around this. However, if you have a different bobbin color and top thread like I do, you want to make sure when you top stitch this, you top stitch it with the right side being mirrored. So don't top stitch them both like this. Top stitch them so that it's opposite of one another. You see what I'm saying? Because then when we attach it to the bag, you'll either have the bobbin thread showing on the front or the top thread showing on the front on both sides. So I'm going to take this to a sewing machine and I'm going to top stitch around all the edges of each one of these at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance first. And then we're going to top stitch a second time only along the enclosed seams, so not the raw straight edge, only the seams at about a 3/8 inch seam allowance. So you're going to have 2 rows of top stitching around the sewn edges. All right, here are your 2 little side wings. They're very cute. The last thing we want to do for prepping these is we want to find the midpoint along the long straight edge. So that's the raw edge. It's not enclosed. So I'm just going to use scissors to do that. But we're going to need these midpoint marks in the next couple steps. And you can set this to the side. Now let's work on these front panels. So you're going to need your exterior and lining for the front panel. And you'll want your shorter zipper and zipper pull. So I'm going to use double-sided tape because it's easiest for me. I'm going to use 1/8 of an inch wide double-sided tape. And first I'm going to add it along the top edge on the right side of my bottom exterior panel. And I'm going to add my zipper pull after I have the zipper completely attached to the panels. If you don't like doing that, if you feel more comfortable adding the zipper pull now and attaching the zipper with the zipper pull on, you're more than welcome to do that. I have a lot of practice putting zipper pulls on. I'm not worried about attaching it later, but you can do it either way. So then I'll take the paper off the tape, take my zipper tape, and I'm going to lay it right side down. You should have a little bit of overhang on both sides. And just attach it to that tape on the top of your bottom panel. And then I'm going to grab the lining bottom panel and I'm going to add some double-sided tape to the right side of the top edge of this panel, just like I did on the exterior. And then take the paper off of your tape. Take your lining panel and lay your lining panel right side down so it's on the wrong side of your zipper. And make sure you're matching it up midpoint to midpoint and also corner to corner with the exterior. So like I said, my zipper is a little bit longer than it needs to be. So I'm not focused on the top corners of my zipper tape because those are going to be trimmed down anyways. I just want to make sure it matches up with my exterior panel, just like that. And I find that tape, it is easier with zippers. We don't have to worry about anything shifting or stretching too much. It's really going to stay just like this while we sew it. So now we're going to sew along this top taped edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance, backstitch at the beginning and the end. So once you have it sewn, you're going to press the lining and the exterior panels wrong sides together. So if you have material that you can use an iron with, you can go ahead and press it with an iron. I'm just going to press it with my fingers. First thing I like to do is match up the midpoints on the bottom edges of both the panels and clip those together, and then clip the corners and sides as well. I just find that working with the raw edges first and then tugging along the zipper makes for a much straighter seam for me. So you see, once I have all the raw edges clipped together, I can just look at the right side of the exterior and just kind of pull along the zipper, and I can press with my fingers, or you can use a seam roller if you have one of those, and I can flatten this out really nicely. And now I'm going to go to the sewing machine and I'm just going to top stitch right along this top edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. So now that that's sewn on, I'm gonna mark the midpoint along the top of my zipper, but it's the midpoint of the entire unit, not the midpoint of my zipper, because you can see my zipper tape overhangs a little bit more on the right than it does on the left. So I'm gonna fold this in half, matching up the bottom edges, and then I'll just pinch along the very top of my zipper, and then mark right on the edge. Don't use scissors to mark this, just use some sort of a pen or something, but only right on the very edge so you won't see it in the end. And that's my midpoint. That's gonna make it easier to attach the top. So I'm gonna grab my exterior top piece, and on the bottom straight edge of this piece, I'm going to add some 1/8 of an inch wide double-sided tape, and then take the paper off the tape, take your zipper, lay it right side up, take your top panel, lay it right side down so that the long straight edge matches up with the zipper and matches up midpoint to midpoint, and then tape along the top of your zipper. And then just double check that the sides of your top panel do match up with the sides of the bottom panel. And then we're gonna just repeat that with the lining panel. So once again, adding double-sided tape along the long straight edge, and then take the paper off the tape, flip over your unit so you're looking at the back of the zipper, and then just tape down your lining panel center to center and corner to corner with that exterior top panel, and tape in place. And now we can take this to the sewing machine, and we're just gonna sew right along that top taped edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance, backstitch at the beginning and the end. And just like we did with the bottom panel, we're gonna give this a good press right along the zipper, so we bring the exterior and the linings wrong sides together, match up the midpoints on the top of your panels first, and then clip along the top edge and the corners just to straighten out that seam by the zipper. And then once you have that all clipped, just give it a good finger press and flatten out that seam right by the zipper. And then once again, we're gonna take this to the sewing machine, and we're just gonna top stitch right along that seam at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. Okay, now let's add our zipper pull. So I'm just gonna go from the right side so that it closes going towards the left and opens going towards the right. So that means I installed the zipper pull on the right edge. And once I have my zipper installed, now I can trim down the overhang of my zipper tape on both sides. So this all matches up. Make sure you grab a lighter and melt down the ends of your zipper tape because it will fray. We don't want that. Now, grab one of your main body liner panels and just lay your front panel over it and make sure it's the same size. If your front panel is a little too tall, then you're going to cut down the bottom edge of it. Mine is like exactly the right size, which is very nice. But if your front panel was too tall, let's say you had a situation like this where you have about 1/4 of an inch overhanging this bottom edge here, what you would want to do is just line up all the other edges, the top and the sides, and then just trace along that bottom edge and trim down your front panel. However, I don't need to do that. Mine are exactly the right size. Nice job, Linds. That's perfect, perfect math. So now I'm gonna add my metal bag tag real quick. So I'm gonna grab my washer and my bag tag, and also my glue, my tape, a marking tool, and a small cut of my vinyl leather. I'm not sure if this is vinyl or leather, but I'm gonna grab some of that. And we wanna move the lining for the pocket out of the way. We just wanna work with the exterior here. And we wanna make sure it's not too close to any of the edges. So I'm gonna make sure it is, my bag tag is pretty big, so I'm gonna make sure mine is at least 1.5 inch up from the bottom. And 1.5, 2 inches over from the right. That's where I'm gonna put mine. Maybe I'll do it like 1.25 inch from the bottom and 2 inches from the right. Bag tags are hard. And then I'll grab my washer and center my washer over that spot and mark placement for my prongs. And then I'm also going to use my washer to mark placement for the prongs on my stabilizer cut. So you could use like fusible fleece, Decovil light, something like that. Or you can just use scraps of the material from your bag. Stabilizer for hardware can be anything. So then I'm going to grab my seam ripper and very, very carefully, I'm going to seam rip along the 2 cuts for my bag tag. And I'm going to do this on the exterior material and also on my scrap material. I'm going to grab my glue. And I'm just going to add some glue to the back of my bag tag. And I like to add glue to the back of my metal hardware most of the time. It's just a little bit of extra security and reinforcement. So I'm going to insert this into the holes. Try not to get glue all over everything. Nice thing about this gridded material is that it's easy to see if it's straight or not. Flip it over, add your stabilizer over the prongs, then add your washer. Push down those prongs. Just double check that it's the way you want it. If it's got a little crooked, that's okay. Fix it. All right, there we go. Yeah, that looks good. And then finally, we're going to grab some of our tape. And we're just going to add some duct tape over the back of this metal hardware so it doesn't rub down our lining material over time. And there we go. Bag tag is installed and looks adorable. So now grab one of your lining main panels and lay it lining right side up, and then take your front panel and lay it exterior right side up, and you're just going to plop it right over that lining panel and match up the midpoints on the top and bottom and clip there first, and then add clips around all the edges and corners. So you should have 3 layers now. You should have the top and bottom exterior, the top and bottom lining, and then the full main lining panel on the back. If you want to base these together now because it is kind of a lot of layers, you can, or you can hold off to the next step. I'm going to hold off to the next step, but I'm going to set this to the side. And now I'm going to grab my exterior back panel, my lining back panel, and then my lining panel has a mesh pocket. And I'm going to take the lining panel with mesh pocket, and I'm going to lay this wrong sides together with this front panel that already is all clipped together. So just line up again the midpoints first, and you can just include this in the clips you already have around all the edges. So now you have 4 layers here. You have quite a few layers. Okay, so just focused on this front panel. Now we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to baste around all the edges through all 4 layers at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So your front panel should now look like this. You have your zipper pocket on the front, your mesh pocket on the back. Now, before we finish up the back panel, I am going to add my adorable bag tag to the lining here. Yeah, I feel like it stands out more on the lining than it does the exterior. So I'm just going to center it, and I'm going to have it come about 1 1/4 inch down from the top edge. And then I'm just going to take this to the sewing machine and top stitch around all 4 edges at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I will leave the tails long and just tie them off on the back instead of back stitching. All right, now you're going to take your back lining panel and your back exterior panel. You're just going to lay them wrong sides together, matching up all the midpoints first and then the edges and the corners, and just clip these together. And now we're going to take this to the sewing machine and just baste along all the edges at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. And then finally for the back panel, make sure it is top on top. So if you have a bag tag, you have the top facing up here. You want to attach your wings. So figure out how you want this in the end if you want to see the top stitching thread or the bobbin thread from the back side. So you see if I have it like this and I fold them down, which is what I want. So you want to line up raw edge of wing with side raw edge of exterior back panel, and use those midpoint marks on the sides to line these up and clip in place. So do this for both of them. And now I'm going to go back to the sewing machine and just baste these wings on at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Make sure that the top pointy part of your wings is on the top and everything is lined up correctly. Nothing is upside down. All right, so you should now have your main front and back panels all prepped. You can set these to the side. So now let's work on our main zipper. So you're going to have your 2 zipper lining panels, your 2 zipper exterior panels, and your main zipper and your zipper pull. You can see I already added some double-sided tape to all this. So I like to kind of lay the zipper right side up in between my 2 exterior panels like this, just so I can see how I want the design to be in the end. And then I add my tape along the edges that I know I want to attach to the zipper. So you can see I have the tape on the top and the bottom here. So let's grab one of our lining zipper panels and lay it right side up. Take the paper off the tape. Take your zipper and you're going to lay your zipper right side up, and you're just going to line it up right along the top edge here. It should match up perfectly. So lining and zipper are both right side up. And then you're going to take your exterior panel that you want to go on the top, or this side if it matters to you, and you're going to take the paper off of your double-sided tape and lay that exterior panel right side down, so it's right sides together with the zipper. Line it up corner to corner, midpoint to midpoint. So once you have this all taped together, you're going to sew along this top taped edge at 1/4 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. So now take your lining and press it back. Take the exterior and press it back as well. Line up the midpoints on the raw edges and use clips to hold these two raw edges, wrong sides together. And go all the way down to the corners as well. And clip there. And then I'm going to clip along the entire raw edge because I'm going to top stitch and baste all at the same time. And now pull along that raw edge and the zipper to flatten out that seam really nicely. So again, if you want to use an iron here, you can, or you can use a seam roller or just your fingers. And now I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and I'm going to baste along the raw edges at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, and I'm going to top stitch along the seam at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I like to start along the raw edges so that my thread doesn't become a problem later. You can backstitch at the beginning and the end if you'd like. All right, there we go. That's how we attach one side. So we're going to repeat that with the other side. I'll walk you through it. We'll just go a little bit quicker this time. So once again, we're going to just take the paper off of our tape from the lining panel, twist our zipper around so we have the zipper right side up, the lining right side up, and then just tape down your zipper corner to corner, edge to edge, and then grab the exterior panel and take the paper off of that double-sided tape and lay it exterior right side down, zipper right side up, and tape in place. And then let's sew along this top taped edge or clipped. You don't have to use tape, you could use clips here, at 1/4 inch seam allowance, backstitching at the beginning and the end. And then once again, gonna press the exterior and lining panels wrong sides together and clip along the raw edges, and then flatten out that seam by the zipper as best you can, and then take this to the sewing machine, and I'm going to baste along the raw edges at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance and top stitch along the zipper at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, I kind of forgot about this next step. So basting the edges wasn't really necessary. So what we want to do now is we want to trim down this panel, and the pattern has the exact length it needs to be and the exact width it needs to be. For me, I'm really trimming down like 1/8 of an inch along each long edge, and then I'm trimming down a little bit along the short edges. You need to lay this on top of a cutting mat to help you, and you need to make sure you, at least with the long edges, you take off the same amount equally. So the pattern is going to tell you exactly how wide this needs to be. So this way, it's going to tell you exactly how wide it needs to be. You're going to divide that number by 2, and you're going to use that number and your zipper teeth to help line this up on your grid, and then cut a little bit off the left and a little bit off the right to make sure it is exactly the right width and the zipper is still running down the center. Unfortunately, I can't show you how to do this, and I can't give you the numbers because it gives away the measurements. The point of this is to make sure that the zipper gusset matches up perfectly with the bottom gusset, regardless if your material stretched, regardless if your zipper tape is wider than what the pattern was written for. So the point is perfection, but it is a little difficult if you struggle with math and, you know, cutting it. I always get weary about cutting a piece when I've got it completely stitched, but I'm gonna go do that. If you have any questions about this, leave it in the comments down below. Like I said, look at the pattern, it has the measurements, and just be careful here. So after you have that cut down, grab your zipper pull and let's add that to our zipper. If you have a preference on which way it goes on based on your exterior material and pattern direction, make sure you think about that right now. I'm not really that particular. And then if you cut down your basting stitches like I did, or if you didn't baste it originally, now you're going to take this back to the sewing machine and just baste around all 4 edges of this at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance to hold it all together. Alright, once you have your zipper panel ready to go, let's attach it to the bottom gusset. So I'm going to take my lining bottom gusset and lay it right side up, and I'm going to take my zipper panel and I'm going to lay the exterior right side up. So I'm bringing my lining panels right sides together. Match this up corner to corner and clip in place, and then grab your exterior bottom gusset panel and you're going to take it exterior right side down so it's right sides together with the exterior on the zipper, and add that to the clips on the same short edge. And now we're going to sew along the short edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance, backstitch at the beginning and the end. So now we're going to attach the other short ends, so just pull over that zipper portion and bring it to the short edge of your lining bottom gusset and clip together, and then pull that exterior panel over so it's right sides together with the exterior of the zipper and add it to the clips, and then sew along this opposite short edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance, backstitching at the beginning and the end. So once you have these both sewn like that, I'm going to trim down the corners. The corners do not have any zipper tape in them, so I feel comfortable doing this. And this can just help reduce bulk when we attach it to the main panels. Okay, so now we want to flip our panel or our gusset so that the bottom gussets are wrong sides together. Match up the midpoint marks along the two long edges and clip together. And just clip along the long edges of your gusset. It's not very big, so this should not be difficult at all. And now I'm going to take this to the sewing machine. I'm just going to baste along both long edges at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then I'm also going to top stitch along the seam between the zipper and the gusset, also at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Do that on both sides. All right, so now you should have a full gusset ring. So before we finish up the bag, we got to mark midpoints. You should have your midpoints on the bottom edge of the bottom gusset still. We're going to fold there, and you should be able to match up the two seams on both sides of the zipper panel. Now we need to remark the midpoints on the zipper panel long edges because we cut those off when we trim this down. So I'm just going to pinch and cut. I'm going to do this on both sides of my zipper panel. And then we need to mark one more set of midpoints. You're going to pull the top and bottom midpoints together, and I suggest using a couple clips to hold this. And then you're going to fold along the sides. So we're finding the midpoint between the midpoints, and you're going to cut those as well. So these are not on the seam of the gusset between the zipper panel and the bottom. This is on the zipper panel portion. So do this on both sides. You should have 4 additional cuts now. Okay, so now we should have gusset, front panel, and back panel all ready to go. I am not doing the binding method per the pattern, so I'm not adding any of that to my gusset. If you want to do that, go for it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to attach my gusset to the front panel first. I'm going to make sure my zipper pull is in the center, and I'm going to lay my front panel right side up. I'm going to take my gusset, and we want to make sure when the gusset closes, it closes with the zipper going towards the left. So sometimes if I can't quite wrap my head around it, I'll kind of faux build the bag like this, and it's like, okay, front panel, zipper closes towards the left, gusset, zipper is closing towards the left, which means this edge here closest to me needs to attach to the top of my front panel, so I'll just flip that together. So there's going to be exteriors, right sides together, match up the midpoints, and clip together. And then flip your gusset so it's lining side out. Find the midpoint on the bottom of your gusset and match that up with the midpoint on the bottom of the front panel and clip those together. And then match up the midpoints on the sides and clip those together. And after you have all 4 midpoints clipped together, then you want to focus on the straight edges, and then we'll do the corners last. These are very tight corners, so we're going to have to really make sure we pay attention to that. But clip all the straight edges that you can first. So you see over here on the corner how my gusset doesn't quite reach the corner of my front panel. What we want to do is cut into the gusset by about 1/4 of an inch, and I'm going to do like 4 to 5 cuts because it is a very tight corner. The tighter the corner, the more you need your gusset to spread. So I'm going to now pull the gusset up, and you see how the material where I cut it, it just spreads apart. We're going to do that. We're going to just let it spread apart and then clip the corners in place. So do this for all 4 corners. If you find it useful to staple these corners in place, go ahead and do that. A lot of people are big fans of that. I don't personally like to staple them. You could also hand baste this if you find it's really, really tight. I feel like the thicker the material you use, the sharper these corners are going to be, so hand basting is a good option. But honestly, just having enough cuts and clips will be fine. So once you have all the edges and corners clipped together, we're going to sew around this entire perimeter at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. I like to sew with the gusset lining side up. To me, that's easiest. I like to use a stiletto and a zipper foot. Go really slow. If you have staples, make sure you don't accidentally sew over the metal of the staples. Take your time here. Backstitch at the beginning and the end. Okay, once you have it all sewn, just pop out those corners and make sure everything looks good. I know it does because this material is so good. And I noticed that I didn't have any pleating while I was sewing this. Oh yeah, this looks so cute. Those corners are tricky. They are, they're tight corners. However, tight corners give you the most structured, perfect bags. It's one of those things where the extra effort is worth it. So I'm gonna make sure my zipper is mostly open before I attach the back panel. But before I do that, I'm even going to attach my binding. So if you want to trim down your seam allowance, you can. You might find that, especially around the corners, your seam allowance might be a little bit bigger than a 3/8 inch. That's totally fine. Now I'm going to grab my elastic, and I'm going to lay my lining main panel right side up. And I'm just going to take my elastic, and I'm going to start at the bottom here and wrap it around that seam. And then I'll just use clips and just go around the entire edge that I just sewed and add the elastic, and I'm just going to stretch it around the corners. This is why I love elastic binding so much, is because you can just stretch it around those rounded corners. You don't have any pleats, any folds, nothing like that. So I'm going to do that for the entire perimeter of the bag. Then once I get to where I started, I have my binding overhang the start of the binding by about 1/2 inch or so. Then I just wrap it around where I started and clip it in place. So now I'm going to go back to the sewing machine, and now I'm going to lay this once again with the lining gusset right side up, and I'm going to top stitch my binding on at a 1/4 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. So once you have the binding attached, just check to make sure you caught the back and it looks good. It looks very nice. So now we're going to attach the back panel the same way. So make sure you have your back panel right side up, top on the top like this, flaps on the side, and then you're going to grab your gusset unit and you're going to lay the raw edge of your gusset exteriors right sides together, and then match up all 4 midpoints and clip together. And then once you have all 4 midpoints clipped together, you're going to once again clip the long edges together first and then work on those corners the same way you did on the front. I find that the back panel is a little bit easier because it's not as thick as the front panel, but still cut into the corners and staple baste it or hand baste it, or just use clips. Whatever you did on the front panel, do the same thing on the back panel. All right, once you have the corners and edges all clipped, once again, we're going to sew with the gusset lining side facing right side up. And we're going to sew along the entire clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Use a zipper foot and a stiletto and back stitch at the beginning and the end. All right, you did it. One last step, one last sewing step. So now we're going to take our binding and we're just going to wrap it around that edge and clip it on just like we did on the front. Once you have the binding clipped in place, once again, I'm going to take it so that the gusset is lining side up, and I'm going to top stitch the binding on at a 1/4 inch seam allowance, back stitch at the beginning and the end, zipper foot and stiletto, once again, very useful. All right, we did it. It is fully lined and closed. We can easily just push this bag so its exterior is right side out. We don't have any holes or anything we have to worry about closing, so we're done sewing. So now with binding like this, you want to take the time to really poke out those corners, because in the beginning you're going to feel like it's fighting against you, but once you push it where you want it, it's actually going to work for you. And it's going to create a really beautiful structure and shape to your bag without you having to add a whole bunch of stiff stabilizer or interfacing or anything like that. The binding does the work. It's like the skeleton of the bag. It's so cute and little. It's just such a little guy, you know? I love that. We make a lot of big bags. It's nice to have just the little one. So the last thing we need to do is connect our D-ring connectors and D-rings, which is actually pretty neat. So you're going to take your D-ring connector and you're going to thread it through your D-ring and wrap it around just like this. Your holes should match up. This is where you do really need rivets. I mean, you could stitch this on if you'd like, but I feel like it'd be kind of a headache to do it. And what you want to do is you're just going to take your little D-ring connector with D-ring and you're going to wrap it around this short nub of your wing. So you have like a swoop down and then like a swoop on the bottom, and then you have a nub. We're going to cover up that nub. And you want to make sure when you do this, you have the holes over the wing, and you also want to make sure that you don't end up cutting a hole through your stitching. So let's take some time to work this out. I'm going to angle this the way I want it. If it's not identical on both sides, that's perfectly fine. You're never going to know. but get it the way you want it, and then use your marking tool and mark through the holes on your connector. Take this off and take a look and make sure that the holes that you're gonna punch don't cut through your top stitching. I noticed for me, one of mine goes right between the two top stitching that we did on the sides. So I'm gonna take my hole punch and I'm going to carefully punch one hole, and then I'm gonna punch the other hole. And then we're gonna take our connector with D-ring and we're gonna take a snap. And I'm gonna insert it through the top one. And then I'm gonna insert it through the top hole on my wing. And then I'm gonna do the same thing with the bottom, just through the top of my connector and the second hole, just like that. And then I'm gonna fold this back, flip it over, and push those stems of my rivets through the holes on the back of my connector and add my caps. And there you go. Doesn't that look so professional and cool? Like, it's such a smart idea. I love this. Linds, you're so smart. Now I'm gonna quickly set this because it is kind of bulky and I don't want those to snap off and lose any of my rivets. So I'm just gonna use my rivet press to press these down. And there you go, easy peasy. So repeat this on the other side. Okay, so we have our adorable little like munchkin of a bag. It's so stinking cute. I cannot get over how cute this little sucker is. So you have your bag and you have like the fanciest strap ever. I love the attention to details on this. I mean, it's just, you know, normally when you have really fine details like that, that usually means like a lot more work, but it really wasn't. The way that these came together, it's not that much more work for a really professional look. I mean, those little details on the sides here and the strap make it look like it was a lot harder than it actually was. So I hope you love making this bag as much as I do. It's so adorable. All right, see? That was quick, right? It's so fun. You can have so much fun with this front panel. It's such a fun bag to make. I love the material that we chose this month. I love how kind of busy but also put together it is. I think it's just so perfect. It doesn't scream Christmas, but it is perfect for the holiday season. Like if you wore this to a Christmas party, it'd be like, oh yeah, it's like a Christmas bag. But if you just wore it out and about with jeans and a t-shirt, it's like, oh man, that's just a really cool bag. I love that. So clever. I'm so happy with how this came together this month. So if you make this bag using the tutorial, please make sure you tag me anywhere at all. If you want to send me a photo, I'm Jessica at OklaRoots.com. I would love to see your version. If you're using the Bag Making Bee Club kit and you want to share it with me, please let me see it. I love seeing how you guys put this together, especially because a lot of you guys are so creative and you're like, you know what, I'm going to switch some stuff up a little bit. I'm going to use some of the vinyl over here instead of the bonded nylon. I think that you can have a lot of fun with this. I hope you're having a great day. Have a fantastic rest of your week. Get out there and make something. Bye, guys.